that knowledge workers spend 88% of their work week communicating across multiple channels. That particular dimension was really fascinating to me. Of if 12% of your week is left for the actual work, and realize communication is part of the work, and that's essential to it. That's what we're doing right now, obviously, in communication. But that stat was quite significant.
Hello and welcome to episode 1 of AI Mavens, the podcast for businesses and professionals that want to stay current and competitive in a world where AI technologies run everything from coffee makers to currency exchanges. My name is Peter Urban and I'm the co-host together with my good friend of many years and collaborator, Dave Bellows. Dave, how are you doing today? We are finally on.
Fantastic, Peter. How are you?
I'm great. It's been we've done quite a bit of preparation for this and built a new studio. It's still in the making. Not quite as perfect as we want it to be, but step by step. And it's also the day after elections, so I think there's quite a bit of news going on at the moment. But before we dive into it, Dave, what is AI Mavens going to be about?
Great question, Peter. Yeah, I think we're all digesting the election. The U.S. election has happened. We're all kind of absorbing what's occurred as part of that, and I think the decision is clear, but just waiting for all the dust to settle there. But
For sure.
AI Mavens is essentially our project to understand of all the different AI tools that are out there, these emerging trends. Everything's changing so fast. What I'm really interested in, and I think we're curious about, is where does that apply to business? How do we take all this knowledge, all these changes, that the pace of this innovation is so high? Where does it actually hit the road? Rubber hits the road and actually make value for businesses. What do you take of all these different ideas that are emerging, and how do you make your business better? How do you show some value out of it? That's, I think, the journey we're on, is to discover that.
Yes, and I think by now it's clear that AI technology is going to have a substantial impact on business, on society, and markets going forward. Without wanting to date both of us, we've both been part of the internet revolution in the 90s. We have seen what mobile has done in terms of shifting things around quite significantly, together with other steps along the way in innovation and technologies, converting businesses and transforming them. I think it's pretty clear that AI is going to have a significant effect, most likely similar to those major moves that we've supported and helped in business to build in the past. And as you say, I think today this AI Mavens podcast will be about us learning together with our guests, the mavens of the AI technology space and the business space, on what's practical, what's real, what can we do now, what can our customers do now, what can businesses in the world do today and tomorrow, and what is a good plan without getting lost in the fast-paced development of AI. So I think that's sort of the mandate of the podcast, right?
Yeah, but it's almost overwhelming how much things change, and so what I think we're looking to do is dig in and find, with all that noise, where is the signal? Where is this, something that's actually valuable and useful? How do businesses actually make use of this? Is where I'm curious to learn, as you say, from our guests and from all the amazing, talented ideas that are out there.
For sure. So we've got some news to share today. Maybe we can you can start with the first news item, which is about IBM announcing some interesting new developments and tools that are seem to be dedicated to making it easier for businesses to implement real AI systems. I'm gonna look up the page that's gonna allow me to share this, while I'll hand it over to you to take a look at this.
For sure, yeah. So IBM has recently announced their new Granite tool set. So what they've done is they've put together some models that are really specific for different disciplines. So they've got their 3.0 version of their language models rolling out. which allows you to focus on things you see here, things like Granite for code, Granite for time series, the Granite Guardian, which is an internal kind of focus tool, and then Granite for geospatial data. And I really like this tool set for a couple of reasons. It allows you to focus in on different areas of discipline, because one of the challenges I see with using a generalized model for everything is that your C suite and your intern probably don't have access to the same information today in your business. They
Right.
have different data sets, different permissions. So if you have one AI tool that looks at everything, that can provide answers to everyone in your business, that doesn't match up with your governance and how your business actually runs today. What this allows you to do is have like Granite for time series. It's a lightweight tool that allows you to do forecasting and modeling. You could have one for sales, one for your executive team at the top level, the macro level of your business. You could have one that was around marketing trends in the industry. You could basically personalize this to the audience that needs to see that information. So you
Right.
might have the same data source behind it, but what you can do is have, Granite Guardian looking at your internal resources, looking at enterprise data security. That's just for your IT team. This lines up with how a business is actually structured, as opposed to using ChatGPT for everything, which just isn't practical in most businesses and enterprises.
Without a structured process behind it. Yeah,
Agreed.
for
Yeah.
sure. And I can see here, okay, it says get time series models for Hugging on Hugging Face. So it's open source, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah. So these are, they have some great tools that if you want to prototype with these, you can use the IBM cloud and spin it up there, or you can download these models and use them internally. They do a great job of having both of those. And if you roll down a little further on this page, you can see that they've actually got some recipes you can build with Granite, and they've got tutorials and tools that you can use to dive in and spin these tools up quickly for a proof of concept, or you can, once you've kind of proved out the value and the use in your organization, use some sample data, you can actually download these, build them into your workflow, and release these on production. So that this is something that you can sort of explore, tinker with, build some use cases around, and then actually build into your organization in a meaningful way, which is why I like these tools so much, because they're not only good ideas, but the way that they're implemented and the way they coach you through and the workbooks they give you are well structured to what the problems that businesses actually need to solve.
Yeah, and please explain, like, help me understand. IBM in the past couple of decades has been basically a premier vendor for enterprise level customers. So
Mm-hmm.
what's the motivation, do you think, of IBM here? Is it to cater to the same audience of enterprise, large enterprise organizations, or do you think they are going downstream with this into the SME space as well?
Yeah, it's interesting because IBM had, so IBM is this interesting organization where they had Watson early on,
Right,
this tool that kind of beat Jeopardy. They were early into this AI space and figuring things out,
right,
and they've long so they've got this innovation that they figured out, but they're international business machines. They're a classic old kind of data and infrastructure company with some consulting services. And this, I think, really lines up with their core strength
right.
around connecting where these innovative tools line up with business. You can, and the sliding scale of running it in their cloud or in your own infrastructure, it's a great mix of both.
Yeah, and I think maybe their motivation to break into the enterprise space with new AI tools will benefit a lot of smaller businesses as well as a
Hopefully.
long tail effect, so to speak, right?
Yeah. If they do it right, we'll see.
If
IBM has a mixed reputation and experience track record in terms of getting some things right, maybe not everything.
Yeah, and knowing you for the better part of 20 years, you're probably already dabbling in trying some of those tools with some of your customers and companies you work with. Probably too early to report any experience or results since this just came out, but I think it makes it, having it on Hugging Face, having it open source, and being able to spin it up in any cloud, basically, not just within IBM's infrastructure, will make it easy to at least experiment in and kind of start to crawl and walk before we can fly on these tools, right?
That's exactly it. Like within an hour, using some of their tutorials, you could take a spreadsheet from a business, spin it up in their cloud or on your local infrastructure if you've got some, and get back some results, something that's actually meaningful for an executive team to see. And that's what I like is you don't need like a 3 week project to figure it out, less than a day, a half a day. You could actually say, here's the type of information we could start to pull back from this. And you'd
Right,
need to tune it and tinker and kind of get it just right, but
right.
that quick response to kind of get an understanding of it, I like that aspect of it.
Yeah, well, fantastic, great. So, looking forward to see those experiments, and maybe we can bring some tutorials or at least some sort of insights into our own experiments to our audience in one of the next episodes. So, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, AI Mavens, and we will bring more insights on how useful these tools are for all sizes of businesses as we go along. Okay, so we have another news item. What's been coming up this week essentially is Anthropic's new AI model can control your PC. Ooh, whoa, 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 whoa. That sounds interesting, Dave. We certainly are into experimenting, but that sounds like an interesting step to take, doesn't it?
Yeah, this is so there's a lot of caveats along with this one. This is a capability that exists. You have to have an API. There's an API that allows control. It's heavily regulated. It's only open to the developer community. So there's lots of caveats along with this. But the core idea of this is one of those concepts where I wonder if they haven't thought it through enough. Is this going to be a disaster of watching your credit card get entered, like all the different ways this can go wrong, your passwords? Snooping over someone's shoulder through the power of AI seems like a terrible capability to have.
Mm-hmm.
But the old Spider-Man quote from Uncle Ben: "With great power comes great responsibility." Hopefully, they have the safeguards in place to have this thoughtfully executed.
You know, we're certainly can bring in some of our experience into this and have some sort of our own opinions and commentary on it. And one of the things that came to my mind when I read this is certainly there's two aspects to this, honestly. One, Anthropic needs news.
Mm-hmm.
OpenAI has been killing it over the last few months in terms of releases and in terms of demonstrating progress, whether it is with their products or whether it is with their last round of massive funding. They seem to be dominating the space, right? And so does their partner to some degree, Microsoft. And so I think Anthropic needed news. And so
Mm-hmm.
this might be one of those things. It's sort of maybe not quite ready for prime time. It may not even be an everyday application, but it's an interesting experiment or exploration in technology, what can be done. So I think it's first and foremost an interesting news item to shine some light on Anthropic's progress. The other part is, do you remember the big days of systems integration and middleware?
I sure
Where
do.
you sure do, yes, because we spend significant amount of our lives in it, and and then we talked about mainframe systems, large client server systems integrating with utilities and web and so on and so on. And I think if I want to strongman this for a moment, this release or demonstration from Anthropic, it might just end up becoming another modern or AI enabled version of middleware. So if you think about it for a moment, of not to run it to control your desktop, your PC with your personal or professional data and information, from family pictures to financial confidential documents. If you think about it from the point of view, you could install this on any computer and use it as an interface for the AI to control tools that it doesn't need to integrate with in a traditional way. So the desktop on those computers becomes the integration interface.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that might be an interesting path forward where, you can say, okay, the AI can read the screen, it understands the imagery, it understands the communication, and now it can use legacy software in any way that it's instructed to or that it needs to. And so instead of it running on your personal desktop, it might just run on computers as a easy way to integrate legacy software. Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, it's a great observation because I think all of us think AI controlling your computers. We think of what we have to lose, the bank passwords, things like that, or our personal photos. But right now, with any Microsoft tool, you can, when you set up a new Microsoft Windows PC, all the configuration software that runs is very similar to this essentially. As an administrator on a Windows desktop, you can do a lot of the same things. This just allows it in a much more flexible way.
Right.
So the idea that you could run a quick security check on someone's machine and do a quick review, or how many of us have sat in a boardroom with a Zoom setup or configuration that doesn't work, and you're trying to get online with it, and the person who's driving doesn't know how to configure this particular machine. It's different from their desktop. If you could run a script, it would simply configure everything correctly and start a Zoom meeting or whatever that action is. Do a quick security check to make sure there's no vulnerabilities. There's so many different positive outcomes for this that in how they've gated it, in how they've kind of put it together as an API, or accessing GIS data from various different systems, or as you say, legacy software that the AI could control and do certain things with. Of course, there's a negative to it, but there are so many positives that this just unlock massive capabilities for AI to collect information and respond back to it in formats we couldn't usually use before. So there's a great possibility as long
Yeah,
with
yeah, yeah.
danger.
So danger, danger, danger. Okay, there's more news from other vendors and players in the space. Of course, none the least, OpenAI has released or a while ago released a tool called Whisper, and now to use it to transcribe medical conversations poorly. Dave, you've read into this, and it's another one of those examples where great benefit potentially, but if you shoot too soon, too early, before it has reached maturity and is reliable, maybe not the greatest space to apply it in.
Yeah, like you talked earlier about this rush for news, this pace of urgency and
Right,
release, and everyone's trying to have some new capability out there. And this is one of them. Or OpenAI has this tool called Whisper that is being used to transcribe medical notes.
right,
And so the thoughtfulness around this is something that I'm curious about if people are spending enough time being thoughtful about that. Because a organization came through and did a review of how effective Whisper is at transcribing notes.
right,
And what they identified is in their test, which was not on looking at medical notes, they had a whole bunch of meeting conversations that they put together that they had transcribed, and they were kind of pulling back some data around this to evaluate how effective is this Whisper tool.
right,
In their tests, their controlled tests, they identified that 80% of the transcriptions had errors. And some of those errors were hallucinations of adding things that were not said in the actual audio.
right.
Sometimes they were racist or biased or had curse words as part of it that were invented that the doctors
Didn't
and
belong. Didn't
patients
belong.
didn't
Yeah.
swear at each other, but that was
Right.
in the transcript.
Right.
So these things existed, which I think all
So
points
it
to
was a kind of a version of AI charrettes, I guess.
exactly. And that was happening. And so the question in all of this is knowing that, how are these transcripts used? Are they used as sort of like a baseline where it is that the confidence level is the thing that I'm really curious about? How do you represent that? Because
Right.
we assume when AI does something, it's perfect or right. The truth is, whether it's you, me, or an AI, there's going to be mistakes. So how do you audit for those mistakes? Understand that? Where's the editing process in this and the evaluation of how accurate is this? If I transcribe something and give it to you, you'd probably assume that it's mostly correct. Hopefully, I get it pretty
Right.
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 What you want to know is how good is Dave at listening to an audio source and transcribing correctly, which is what we want to know from Whisper as well. This gives
Right.
us some metrics around that, but then how do we help doctors to use this information effectively and understand how to pull it in? That's the real thing I'm curious about.
Yeah. Yes, and the other side of the coin is that I was actually surprised when I saw those news about the poor performance or supposedly poor performance on AI transcription for medical Conversations, because I'm currently working on a project myself that is still is confidential still, but will come to the light of day soon,
Mm-hmm.
where a lot of transcription is involved, and I showed you some of it, Dave. And
Mm-hmm.
in my experience so far, even on long and complex topics, the transcription quality of Whisper was exceptionally good. Like our team could rarely find any hallucinations on transcribing audio, even when the audio quality was less than ideal with background noise or poor recording or whatever it may be. So I have a small question mark in my head where I've heard often medical professionals in symposia discussing AI for the future. This is years ago,
Mm-hmm.
dismissing any possibility that it will have an impact on the medical profession uh, quite violently, like without
Mm-hmm.
even considering the possibility, essentially, right? And so um, it might be completely what it is at the face of it, that it's just not there yet. It can't do the job reliably. And then in something as important and as sensitive as medical transcription and basically recording facts, it can't be applied at this point, right? Or not productively. But in the same time, I'm also wondering whether there's maybe a little bit of influence from one or the other direction. So that's something we should keep in mind. I think, but I think probably we if we take the time, we can probably dig into the results and see for ourselves what was what came out of it.
Yeah, like it's interesting to kind of have a sensational headline of taking the knees out of this tool that's being used in the medical community, and
Right,
I'm sure any of us could put together a test that an AI will fail
right,
and kind of make that spectacular. But the idea of like if it gets it mostly right, even if it's like 50% of the right, it's probably better than our memory if we look at the stats of what we remember. And even
mm,
if it's imperfect, if the
right.
idea of you and I go to a doctor and got a transcript with every medical term or diagnosis or medication, that AI could look up and give us a one pager on any of those things for our insight,
Point out
even though
maybe
it's
the potential conflicts.
exactly do a
Right,
quick analysis of drugs and make sure there's no issues and list all the side effects and have that as a document that we would then have as part of our medical record. I think that's an amazing potential out of this, as
right.
long as it's not, written in stone, perfect truth. We understand the nuance and the complexity of it. That everything's going to make mistakes.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So to be continued and to be observed. So the next and last news item I'm bringing up today is, of course, what happened election time, election night, and we did really don't want this AI Mavens podcast to be in any way political, but I think we can't ignore the fact that there has been two trends on the two different opponents for the election to look at technology and innovation, specifically with regards to regulation, in two different ways. And therefore, we can probably expect now that Donald Trump has been announced as the official winner of this year's election, bearing in mind that not every vote has been counted to completion yet, but that's the official announcement, anyways. Um, that we're probably going to look at a little bit of an interesting time ahead of us with regards to loosening regulations, with regards to probably a freer playing field for the innovators to go for, instead of maybe having to be throttled down by regulatory forces. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm really curious to see kind of what this. I think there's lots of technology and innovation decisions that have kind of been waiting to see what happens out of this decision point. Now that it's made by the American people, what is this going to look like over the next 2 years? In 1 to 2 years from now,
Right.
what is the type of innovation and the pace of innovation that's going to occur? If we're going to use history as an example, There may be more openness around mergers and acquisitions. There may be more openness around innovation and regulation. Really curious to see how this changes our world and what new technologies we might see as part of this. I think a lot of the big technology companies didn't want to see a hindering or a hampering of kind of the pace of innovation. And so to see the doors thrown wide open, theoretically, if what we can see is policy comes forward, what
Right.
that looks like in a year, I'll be really curious to see where we go.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll document it here
Mm-hmm.
with the AI Mavens podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Again, if you're interested to follow along with us, please like and subscribe our channel AI Mavens in order to get up the latest updates on what we discover, what we learn, and what we learn from our guests. We are eager to bring on some really interesting guests over the next few episodes, and once we get our feet underneath us with running this show. So after the news section, we have one main topic we want to dive a little bit deeper on for today, and that is a report that came out from Grammarly about the state of business communication in 2024. This is an interesting report that you can access yourself via the Grammarly website. And it is conducted by the Harris Poll, an analysts organization, a research organization that was contracted by Grammarly to conduct this research. So I'm going to share what I have here in terms of the document that came out of this. And here we go. So the 2024 state of business communication, AI's potential to turn overload into impact. Dave, how did you read this when you came across?
Yes, some of the stats in this are really fascinating. So this idea of overload, they do a really good job of outlining what overload looks like, and then try and give you some key tools and metrics to figure out how to bring impact to your business. That stat right there in that red circle, that knowledge workers spend 88% of their work week communicating across multiple channels. That particular dimension was really fascinating to me. Of if 12% of your week is left for the actual work, and realize communication is part of the work, and that's essential to it. That's what we're doing right now, obviously, in communication. But that stat was quite significant. There's a corollary stat that 78% of knowledge workers have seen an increase in the last 12 months in terms of the amount of communication expected out of them. It is this virtual world that we're in. Remote work is great. It's an amazing opportunity to be alive. But just how do we keep up with this pace of change? And how do we get work done out of this is sort of the core problem they're trying to explore in this report. And you can see the 2022 to 2024, they've got some metrics over time and how that's changed. It's really fascinating information.
Absolutely. And if you think about it, just to bring this home completely, knowledge workers include engineers, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, right? And we've both seen organizations where engineering teams are so wrapped up in project management and communicating amongst each other, but also with the rest of the organization in terms of scoping projects, in terms of reporting progress, in terms of just keeping everybody apprised or getting inputs. That if you think about it, if you have $1 million budget in a small business, a small medium-sized business for engineering, and you fall into this statistic, you're spending $880,000 a year on communicating, right? That's quite the hammer, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So of course this is on average across all departments of the organizations that have been surveyed here. If you look at the top, the organization that ran this study has explained who the target audiences were that were surveyed, and it's quite a wide spectrum. So, but it is a massive factor in cost and in focus and in effort that is spent with communications. And it is getting to the point where you wonder when does the actual work get done if you're not just a professional communicator. And
Yeah, It's interesting that they've got it split between executive, I think a third executive, and about two-thirds or three-quarters in terms of knowledge workers, front-end contributors. But there's another stat later on that knowledge workers in the HR space are using 47 hours of their work week around communication. So if you've got a 40-hour work week, they had a couple examples where hybrid work, HR, they're exceeding the bounds of their work week just in communication. So when, as you say, when do they find time for this? It's
Overtime.
past
Overtime is the
past
work
that
time.
breaking point. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and
So,
that's what I hear that more often, and sometimes feel it even myself, where people say, when I'm home or when I'm super early in the office, when nobody can bug me, that's when I get work done, right? And that's
mhm.
exactly the effect that we're seeing here, is that the multi-channel communications has just become, for many organizations, kind of dominating and overwhelming the majority of the time. Here is another stat that is or sort of an expression of what people have reported, is like business leaders report effective communication leads to 64% increased productivity. Makes sense. 51% customer boosted customer satisfaction, and 49% raised employee confidence. So that's when things go right. Meanwhile, poor communication leads to 40% of decreased productivity, 37% extended timelines, and 32% increased costs. So 32% increased costs means basically half of those 88% of time spent communicating is a result of poor communication.
Agreed. And what I mean, this is a report sponsored and promoted by Grammarly, which helps you
For
write
sure.
more effectively and more efficiently and spell correctly. What they're trying to say in all of this is if so much of your team's time is communication, and even if a fraction of that, say it's 20, 30%, is me articulating to you poorly, Peter, and you trying to grapple with what I mean, if you can reduce that amount of confusion, if I'm communicating clearly to you every time, and you spend less time reading what I'm trying, what my intent, what I'm actually trying to say, if I'm really effective at communicating to a wide audience, if I send an email to 100 people and it's messy and not well thought through, I'm taking up 100 people's time and amplifying and magnifying that significantly.
Yeah.
If I am concise and clear and articulate in my expression, those 100 people get the benefit of that. So they're trying to figure out how do you use power tools, AI in this space. And Grammarly is such a accessible, most of us are familiar with it if we used a Google Doc
Right.
or email. You've seen it in place. It kind of underlines and helps you out and coaches you along. It's a great tool to be articulate and clear in your expression, and kind of putting the scale of this problem into mind is really interesting for me. Of, yeah, sure, squiggly underlines are helpful, but when you see how much communication happens and how much efficiency you could get from getting that right, it's really fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. I'll bore you with one more screen of
Please.
stats, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about what we think is a good step forward, but beyond the things you just mentioned. So here you can see business leaders' top priorities for the next year. So what's happening? What's really moving forward on this is 57% are aiming to improve operational efficiency. 54% employee satisfaction and retention is what is a plan or a goal for next year. And then increasing revenue profitability is what 55% say is one of their main goals. AI usage in the meantime, now and looking ahead, is that 60% of all professionals are using generative AI in some fashion at the moment. And that I find a really interesting stat, because if you think about it, most enterprise businesses claim that they have very little adoption so far in terms of in terms of AI tools. So I think it's maybe not a top-down approach yet, but it's certainly in many organizations a bottom-up, where an entire department or even individuals just utilizing the tools like ChatGPT, etc., in a Wild West wilderness kind of approach. Let's just use it because it helps me, whether that's the organization's policy or not. What's your experience so far with this, and what are your thoughts on these numbers?
Yeah, it's interesting to kind of think about the enterprise adoption because there's this concept of shadow IT. You've got
Yes.
Microsoft document management and storage, but it's clumsy. And so a lot of the time, what happens in shadow IT is you'll spin up a quick Dropbox account because the files are too large or too clumsy, and only one person in your organization has access to that, and
Right.
the security's lax on it. That's the kind of thing you want to avoid in an
Right.
IT department. And I think there's a lot
Exactly.
of shadow AI happening right now where I would be curious the number of people that have a chat GPT window open so they can bounce some of their copy into it, rewrite it or tweak it. I see this happening all the time with clients I talk to. Then they copy and paste it back into the official email program and send that out to the communication. I think that's happening a lot right now. Someone generates some text, someone put some bullet points and uses an external tool to generate something and then brings that back into the corporate or enterprise environment.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that's really interesting, I was talking with a client this morning about is they focus on Claude instead of Chat GPT because for them, they get the written grammar with Chat GPT is clumsy or it has elements in it that are kind of characteristic of AI. They don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
And Claude gives them, they can tune it and tweak it to give a much better, authentic writing experience. This is someone with a literature background, so it kind of knows what they're talking about.
Right.
Uh, Discerning the right tool and figuring that out is still this phase that we're in. When do you use Midjourney versus ChatGPT versus something else to generate an image? It depends on what you want to get. And I think this is where rolling that out across an enterprise or organization is complex and messy, and you need all these security tools. So I think that shadow AI is happening all the time right now just because people are
For
trying to be
sure.
more efficient and exploring and it makes their job simpler. If I
Yes.
can spend 20 minutes doing something instead of 2 hours, hopefully all your smart team members are spending the 20 minutes to do it and being more efficient. That's what you actually want to see happen. How do you support that at the enterprise adoption layer? That gets a lot messier. So I think is probably happening more often than is reported in some of these stats. And figuring out how to encourage that in the right way, I think, is what organizations need to grapple with.
Yeah, and there is the factor of, okay, the when you look at the economics of writing and of communicating in a written form, you think, okay, with AI, it's becoming much easier to create content. So therefore, let's create more content. And that's sort of maybe the natural instinctual reaction, because before we were struggling with writing enough blog posts to be up to date with our blog every week, or our internal newsletter was always lacking a little bit, and now this is easier to create just with a few keywords and press go on ChatGPT or whatever tool of your preference. But of course, it's kind of a no-brainer and the obvious, but still has to be observed, which is quantity is not quality and quantity is not better. Which means I think the first focus should be on how can we become more efficient and effective in our communication, and therefore what is the factor that needs to learn how to use these tools is basically the team, the staff, the employees of the organization. And that's why I think training internally is so key. Is first understand what are your needs, where are your inefficiencies specifically, how can the tools help to counter those inefficiencies in achieving your goals, but also in reducing the overhead of miscommunication or of just sheer volume of straining the organization with too much communication, and then turn that into a plan that you can train your people with, because those will be the ones triggering these tools and producing the content, right? And I think it seems to be so much focused on implementation at the moment, on
Mm-hmm.
tools, on how do we get it safe into our organization, how do we get it connected to our confidential information in order to be able to utilize the intelligence for analysis or whatever. But I think that the big piece that's overlooked is, or not overlooked, that doesn't get as much attention at the moment, is what are actually the efficiencies we're wanting to gain across the organization, and how do we turn that into adopting the right tools, which is the implementation part, but then how do we adopt the people to actually utilize those tools in a way that doesn't turn into a negative result?
Yeah,
Does that make
I
sense?
love what you're saying there, Peter, because it's both the tools and the tactics. And one of the
Right,
things I see emerging in a lot of companies is that there's a handful of people that have figured this out.
right,
That use tools. They take a couple of bullet points and they spin that into a paragraph, pull that
right,
in, edit it, and revise it so it's their voice, and then send that out. Or they
right.
take, if you're like me and you haven't had your morning coffee and you're grumpy and you write an email, you can copy and paste that into Chat GPT and say, make this sound a little more cheerful and happy, and it'll revise it for you and bring back a better characterization of yourself
It's the caffeine
using
dial, the caffeine
exactly the
dial on
caffeine.
the
But
on.
make this sound happier. Add coffee.
Right.
In that, I see a handful of people in an organization using those tactics along with the tools to get great results. And I see a lot of people in organizations who are just overwhelmed or confused by it. And if all you did was, I mean, from an organization standpoint, you could implement Grammarly across the board and have all your tools, use a simple tool like that. But in terms of just getting the training and insight into how do you actually get someone who is an expert or has figured this out, sharing that knowledge, if all you did was spread that efficiency and knowledge and those tactics across your entire team, that would lift your efficiency, smooth out your communication,
Tremendously. Yeah.
improve everything. If just that is all you did in this year as your next focus, as you're also doing your data science and all those kind of things we'll dive into later,
Yeah.
simply communicating well and effectively across your whole team and giving everyone access to those tools that are simple and free and out there today, I think that would be a huge lift for most companies.
Yeah, and the same is if you go into internal meetings. I mean, people often say it's a 1 hour meeting. Yeah, if it's a 1 hour meeting for 8 people, it's actually an 8 hour meeting, right? In terms of time and effort that goes into it. So if you can summarize the documents that are the basis of the meeting quickly, reduce the hours to prepare for a meeting instead of not preparing for a meeting to be effective and efficient, and then go into a meeting and reduce that to a half-hour meeting, then you basically save 4 hours of the organization's work week, right? And so a lot can be achieved with not very much.
Agree. Yeah, General Electric had this old school technique where they would actually calculate the value of a meeting. If the two of us were in a meeting or there was 10 of us, they
Right,
would add up the salaries and at the
right.
bottom of the meeting notes,
The cost.
write out the expense of that internal meeting just to make it explicit for people. And that alone reduced meeting length in General Electric across the board. This was, 25, 30 years ago.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
how do you kind of give some of those same tools of here's the summary if someone doesn't need to be in a meeting? But I look forward to the day where it's all chat GPTs, generating content. There's one person in the meeting with a whole bunch of agents, and then there's a whole bunch of summaries coming out of that. We have to be careful not to get down that road too far now.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
AI's both ways.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. The pros and the cons, and that will be the arc of tension that we're going to try to ride for everybody, for ourselves to learn,
Mhm.
to move forward, to implement with our clients, but also to see where things are going. If you look at the social media revolution, we certainly had some benefits, but we also saw some quite now obvious downsides in society and in even in business. And I think it's a good idea to look at it critically and in the same time not miss the opportunities as they come along, because we're certainly not going to stop it from happening.
Agreed. Yeah, this is, as you said earlier today, not a fad. I think AI is here
It's
to
not.
stay. Is something is going to be around. It's not the 3D TVs or the metaverse as you were describing it earlier. I love
Yes.
that framing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not. And the reason why we're quite confident is because it's already the technology is already infused in so many processes, from stock markets, trading platforms, purchasing platforms, and I mean, even in journalism, unfortunately, now a lot of the content that we are presented with is not necessarily human generated, at least not entirely. So it's inevitable, because the temptation of the upside in terms of cost savings or in terms of margins that can be achieved at the edges of that leading innovation is significant, so I think when the benefits can be this high, it's very hard to steer against it from any perspective.
Agree. That report that we were looking at from Grammarly, they call this, they look at how much time people spend communicating, how generative AI could make them more efficient. And the way that they frame this in that report is it's a $1.6 trillion opportunity. Or if you break that down to the workers involved, this averages out to $16,445 saved per year per worker. So if any of us in business could get 15 grand back in our jeans to either reward our team or to do something with or chase innovation, it certainly seems worth it. So I
Yeah,
think the idea out of this is like, what are those tactics we can pull in today to start on this journey? Don't
yeah,
let a handful of your team run away with this. Figure out how to take those team members, have them train everybody else, and share that knowledge and start. Just begin this experimentation process, pull some of those tactics in, figure out a playbook or a process or a way to make this simple and safe and start there.
yeah. Don't go with it because we can or because the technology exists. Look at the organization, look at the efficiencies, look at the inefficiencies, and look at where does it align and apply first, and where does it align in a way that it can be experimental and start slow, step by step, to gain some confidence and some success, and then build on it and build on it over time. But if you wait until it's a proven safe and secure way of doing it,
It's
we
too
can
late.
I think we can almost guarantee you others will be up and over the hills and you won't be able to catch up. That's the threat. That's the
Mm-hmm.
other side of the opportunity, is the threat. So Dave, great episode. First one.
Yeah,
What do you think?
it's great. Great conversation. Exciting to explore. Love this Grammarly report and excited to see what we want to learn next.
What do you want to learn next? What are your expectations for the next few episodes? I think we're gonna dive into more topics. We're gonna bring some better, even more advanced examples, how businesses specifically can adopt, experiment, and learn with us. And I think we're gonna have some exciting guests as well. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I think there's a few different ideas coming out, like this, the one IBM we talked about of how to actually take some of these tools that are out there and make them practically useful for you.
Sure.
Grammarly is a great example, but what about something a little more complex? What if your business is a little more sophisticated? What would that look like for you? That's something
Yeah.
I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to digging into.
I just as a closing note, I had the and we talked about this briefly, but I had the unfortunate experience of contracting pneumonia a few weeks ago, and so I spent some time in the hospital, just a day, essentially to get checked out and get on the right path back to health, which was achieved. I'm glad to report, and everything is
Glad to
back
see
to
you
normal.
there, back and
Yes,
healthy.
thank you. And while I was waiting in the hospital to have my turn and see a doctor, I actually went on to ChatGPT. And for a new project, I basically treated ChatGPT as a, let's call it, mid-level marketing manager. And I asked it to essentially develop a strategic and tactical plan for a marketing initiative for a new product. And this is a space that I'm familiar with, that I've worked with people from all walks of life and experiences, from the bottom to the very top. And I have to say, I was quite surprised
Hmm.
what the OpenAI's ChatGPT model could present. I would say what I was able to produce, or what ChatGPT produced for me, interacting with me, giving it the right prompts, giving it right feedback, answering questions to the model before it came out with suggestions and results, ended up being something that I think a mid-level marketing manager would probably need a better part of the week to put together. And we're talking here 45 minutes of time investment. So maybe that's an example we're going to run through with our audience.
Hmm.
One of the next episodes where we bring in, a challenge and one of those processes, and show how we've done this, and then talk about how can this be implemented, not just as an experiment, but actually part of your process.
Yeah, we went through that example you pulled together, and the idea that you were doing it while in hospital, you had nothing else you could do, that you made use of that time, and the efficiency you gained out of that was, as you say, almost a week's worth of a typical marketing person's effort. That if you'd sent an email out to collect that from someone, you might have gotten similar information, similar quality back at the end of the week. And the fact that you could get that in real time as you were sitting in the hospital, that it reduced that from a week down to an hour or two, and you could iterate on top of that and get back high quality information. I think that's really going to change how people use information, access information, and it's a great example that we should dive into for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And not that I want to spoil your day, but it was quite a sight of me sitting there in a hospital gown and slippers, and and working and on half energy essentially, with pneumonia, walking ChatGPT through this process and getting some good results and being surprised about it, even now when I look back at it. So thank you, Dave, for coming on today. It's fantastic. Thanks for joining me in this collaboration, being a partner in AI Mavens. I really look forward to what we can learn together, what we can share, and who we can connect with. Where can people find you if they're interested in talking to you?
That's a great question. You can find me on Twitter. I'm on there very infrequently, but would love to connect with you there. As a reach out, let me know. I'm at Dave Bellows, the name on Twitter, or X,
Yep.
however you want to call it these days.
X Twitter. Yeah. Okay. The X Twitter is now X.
Exactly.
Yeah. So same here. Peter Urban on X. Not very prolific there lately. I think it's a bit of a inflammatory environment, and I have to find my audience there yet again, that I feel comfortable with. But you can find me on LinkedIn, of course, as well, and so are you, available on LinkedIn, Dave. And
Right.
with the next episodes, I think we're going to spin up a little website as well for AI Mavens to have as a contact platform, and then we'll go from there. Please like and subscribe. Please hit us up in the comments. What are your thoughts? What are you looking forward to? If you want real AI insights, information, news, what are you most interested in? How can we come together on this journey on learning, on using and applying for everybody's benefit, and in the same time work hard on minimizing the downsides. So I'm looking forward to this journey with you, Dave. Thank you very much for today.
Thanks, Peter. Throw us a business challenge in the comments. Give us a challenge to figure out. We'd love to see that.
Bye bye.